I've started working on these floor stiffeners that you see here. There are four of them. There's one here, here's another, and here's another. Pay close attention to the part numbers for the stiffeners because there's a 772 Bravo right, there's two of those, and then there are two 772 Bravo left stiffeners. So make sure you get the lefts and the rights in the proper locations, and also make sure that you have the ends oriented. I've got one that I'm working on here, and the ends are bent ever so slightly different. This one is a little bit shorter and not quite as exaggerated, the bend. This one is longer and it's a little bit more pronounced. So make sure you have the ends oriented correctly, and you make sure you maintain which two are the right side and which two are the left side. This particular one that I'm working on here, it is one of the stiffeners that attaches to this angle bracket on the firewall and this bracket that's on the back side of this bracket here. Those are the two that are the most difficult to fit because there's a lot involved with getting it to fit correctly and to get it to play nice on both ends with the other brackets. So I have one in place that's finished. I'll show you that one in a minute, and I'll show you how to get these fitted in there and get them to play nice with everything else. The first thing that I did, I fit this up in the fuselage as is, and it fits pretty good. I didn't have to cut it or do anything weird to it. The only thing that I would recommend, and I'll show you this when I crawl up underneath the airplane. On this end here, you can see where I rounded it off on the inside a little bit. That's just so it will nest nicely with the other angle that's already installed. And I did the same thing on this end, but on the opposite leg and on the outside here. I just rounded it over a little bit so it will nest with the other angle that's installed. And the last thing that I had to do is cut this notch out here. And I'll show you that here in a minute. So let me get this back up underneath the airplane, and I'll show you what I've got so far. All right, so now I am back underneath the airplane, and I've got this angle piece in that I was just showing you on the bench. And this is the firewall end, and you can see where I cut the notch here and why I cut the notch to clear this angle here. You can see where the end of this piece has to nest within the radius of this angle in here. So that's where I had rounded off the edge of this piece so it would nest inside of this radius here. And on the other end, the lighting's gonna suck, but I did the same thing on this end here. So it will nest on this radius, just a little bit. And that's all I've done so far on this piece. So now at this point, you have to, this bracket here has 3 pre-punched holes in it. You have to match those holes to this angle. You have to make sure you keep the angle, this angle, before you drill these holes. Make sure that it's tight up against this flange here, like that. Make sure it's tight. Make sure you have it positioned this way, fore and aft, and then you can do these holes. When you come down to this end, you also have to drill it and ultimately rivet it to this angle, but there are no existing holes. You have to lay these holes out yourself and put them both in the angle and in this piece. Now the instructions tell you to draw on the back side of this flange. They tell you to draw a center line. On these pieces here, these two pieces that connect to these angles, don't bother drawing a center line on them because This end has to mount like this, up against here, and over top of this one. This end has to mount around this bracket, just like you see it here. And then when you have it in place, if you go on the outside of the airplane and look down through the pre-punched holes that are in the skin, you won't see your line because it's going to be off. But that's where these need to be. These need to connect to these angles on the ends just like I have them. And they just don't line up with the center of the angle with the holes in the skin. That's just how it goes. Now, I've not done these yet. I don't know how these are going to fare. I'd imagine there's nothing to connect them to on the ends. It just steps over this angle and you put a rivet through it. And you come down here, it steps over, and you put a hole in a rivet. So I'd imagine this one you can line up, these outboard angles you can line up with your center line. But these two inboard ones, don't worry about the center line, okay? So now that I have these cut to length, well, I didn't cut them to length, but I did my bevel to get them to nest on each end. I cut my notch here. I'm happy with the way that they fit. So now I'm just gonna start match drilling holes here. I'm going to start match drilling the holes in the skin along the length, and then I'll lay out the holes for this angle here. Now let me switch sides. This one is finished. I'm fighting a cold. That's why I sound kind of strange. Probably sound strange all the time, but anyway. So this one here is finished. Sorry for the blinding light. But I've got the holes drilled through it here to mate with this angle. I've got the holes drilled through it lengthwise to mate with the skin. And then I have laid out the holes and drilled the holes in the angle on this angle piece to mate with this one. You can see there's one here, there's one hidden behind the cleco, there's another one here. But I've not drilled those holes to this. I've marked those holes onto this bracket using the drill bit like I always do. What I'm going to do when I get all of these angle pieces laid out and completed, I'm going to leave the angles here, but I'm going to take the skin off. And with the skin off, I'll be able to match drill these holes into this bracket. And you can see I did the same thing. I had to notch it at this end. I radius in here to nest. I radiused it. I did the radius on this end to get it to nest. And that's it. That one is completed. I'm going to do the same thing with this one that I just showed you. Here on the other side, I'll do my match drilling and get this one fitted in, and then I'll move on to these two outboard ones. This one and over here on the other side. This one. All right, talk to you soon. Now I have that angle bracket clecoed on each end. So what I had done, like I said, I started here and I clamped this angle bracket to this angle bracket, and I made sure that this angle was tight against this angle here, pushed up tight, clamped. And then from the top side down, using my drill motor, I drilled through this hole, and then I just lightly marked this hole and this hole. Took the aluminum out, drilled these, deburred, came back, clecoed it in place, and then I came down to this end and I did the same thing. I made sure that this was pushed up tight against here, and then I clamped it here, and using a drill bit one size smaller, I just reached in like this through the hole, twist the bit a few times just to make an indication, and then I took the angle out, drilled that hole, brought it back, clecoed it in place. So now, like I just did, I'll mark this hole, and I'll mark this hole, My camera battery is gonna die. So now this hole is marked. This hole is marked. Now what I can do is I can go topside with the drill motor and down through the skin, very lightly mark all of these holes. And then I'll take this aluminum piece out and I'll drill all of those holes that I just marked on the drill press. And then I'll come back and lay out these holes for this bracket here. Here is that same angle piece back on the bench. I wanted to show you a couple things. One, these are the holes, or these are the marks that I'm left with when I have this angle piece clecoed in place on the ends, and then from the top, since the fuselage is upside down, I call it from the top, but coming through the skin, using the skin holes as a guide, these are the marks that I'm left with when I spin the drill bit a few revolutions through those holes onto this aluminum piece. Those are the indications that I get. They're very nice, and they're very clean. And I'll show you here in a minute why I do it this way. The second thing I want to point out is the line is the center line, and you can see the holes are off center. So like I said, on these two particular pieces, don't worry about the center line. Don't even draw a center line, because like I said, the ends of these have to be located where they're located on the fuselage, and then the holes coming down through the skin, they're going to fall where they need to fall. So like I said, I had this clecoed in place, and then I came down through the skin with my drill motor, and I just kissed this aluminum with that drill bit going through the skin. These are the marks that I'm left with. Now what I do is I bring it over and I put it, I've got this camera plugged in. I'm trying to charge the battery, so now I got to drag a cord along with it. I bring it over here to the drill press, and I'll finish drilling these holes up here on the drill press. What I start with is a really small drill bit. This drill bit here, I believe is a number 50. It might be smaller than that. But when you have these indications here that you've already made, when you go to drill these with this initial tiny drill bit, it nests down inside here automatically. It automatically finds the center of each of these indications and drills the hole perfectly. And then from there, I'll step this up to the number 40 in this case, and then final drill all these. So now that these are marked, I drill them with this small bit here, which I believe is a 50. I'll drill them all, and then I'll come back with my number 40 and final drill them. And they always fit absolutely perfect after they're finished. So I'm going to finish drilling this, and then I'll have to lay out the holes for that other bracket that's on the firewall. That will be next. Back underneath the airplane, I've got the angle piece clecoed back in place. I've got this end secure with clecos. I got a couple clecos through it and the skin. And at this end, I also have it secured with clecos. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out holes that need to go between this bracket and this angle bracket here. There are no pre-punched holes like there are at the other end. So you have to make these up entirely on your own. So now that I have this clecoed, I have a clamp here to make sure that this piece and this angle piece are nice and tight to one another. I'm going to grab a Sharpie marker, a fine point Sharpie, and I'm just going to mark where the end of this bracket falls onto this bracket. So the end of this heavy angle piece is right there. That's all I'm going to do is just draw a line there. Now I'll take this angle bracket off and I'll lay out the holes for this. I'll drill this after I get the holes laid out. I'll drill this piece. I'll bring it back, and then using the drill bit, I'll mark through those holes onto this piece. So that's next. Alrighty, so we are back on the bench. This is the angle piece that I just had up inside the fuselage. This line here is the line that I had made representing the end of that bracket. So that heavy metal bracket came across and it stopped right here at this line. So to lay out these 3 holes, all I did was from this line, I measured back for edge distance. These holes are going to be 1/8 inch holes. So the minimum edge distance here from that other bracket is 1/4 inch. So I measured back from this line 1/4 inch. Remember, this line represents the end of that heavy piece of angle. 1/4 inch back, mark the line. Now, as far as the spacing goes, if you remember on the other end, these 3 holes here were already determined by that angle bracket that was here. It was pre-punched, so you just match drilled this piece to that piece. That piece was already pre-punched with this hole distance here, so I just copied this. If you measure these are 3/4 inch apart, so I just use those dimensions here. So from the edge, 1/4 inch for edge distance, made a line, then I just measured across 3/4, made a line, another 3/4, made a line. And then of course, since there aren't any existing holes that you have to match to, you can just go right down the center. So these 3 holes are centered across the width here. And that's it. So now I've already marked the holes. I've already center punched these 3 locations. I'll take it over to the drill press using a very small drill bit. I'll drill these 3 holes and then I'll step them up to these particular ones, like I said, are 1/8 inch. So I'll step these up to a number 30 drill bit. And then at that point, I'll put this back inside the fuselage. I will cleco it and I will clamp it to that heavy metal angle. And then through these 3 holes, using my drill bit, I'll come through these holes with the drill bit and mark these hole locations onto that heavy metal bracket. Once I get all of these angle pieces in place, I'll keep them clecoed on the ends, and I'm going to take that skin off, and then I can come down from the top and drill these holes that are on those heavy metal brackets. So that's the plan. All right, I hope that's clear. If it's not, hopefully it will make sense to you when you get into it and you start working through it. If not, you can always contact me and we'll talk. All right, I'll talk to you guys again soon.